Morning, everyone. Morning. So we're in week number 4 of a series in which we're talking about the really ugly business of forgiveness. And I say that forgiveness is ugly because, of course, as soon as I talk about it, you begin to see a mental image of that person who did those things. And with the seeing of that image, you are painfully reminded that person robbed you of a better past, and it hurts. It hurts very much, and it's hard to get over it sometimes. And because I don't like it when you hurt, because I am fundamentally a nice person, I thought this morning I'd give you a little bit of respite from all of that difficulty and talk about something much more pleasant. I thought this morning I'd talk about revenge. There you go. What an interesting group you are. So this is going to be much better, isn't it? This is going to be much more fun. The word revenge is even pleasant to say. It rolls off the tongue in a slightly pleasing way. Revenge. It's therapeutic to say it, revenge. The idea of getting the last laugh is deeply attractive to our wounded hearts. Were we open enough and honest enough to admit it, we would say to one another that many of our most visceral fantasies are fantasies in which we get our own back. So to that end, I'm going to teach you today from one of the stranger parts of the Bible. For those of you joining us online, welcome to you. Thank you for coming again. We're looking at a book in the Old Testament called the Book of Judges. This is a strange book packed full of strange stories, none stranger than the one that begins in chapter 15 and verse 1. This story is a day in the life of a man called Samson. To give you just a quick insight into the sort of person we're talking about, perhaps it would be helpful for you to think about your cousin who lives in North Bay. You know the guy. He wears a plaid shirt all day, has scrapes on his knuckles, plays hockey, has a mullet, drives an old Chevy pickup truck with a half-finished 2.4 on the passenger seat. You know the guy? That's the guy. Verse 1, we're told that later on, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. The background to this episode is that he and his wife had a huge falling out. The kind of falling out that ends with doors being slammed and him going off to his hunting cabin for the weekend to finish the rest of his 2.4. And then after a few days of that, perhaps when he sobered up and calmed down, he decides he should go back home and make up with his wife like you do. And like any sensible man, he realizes he shouldn't go home to his wife empty-handed. And so he thinks, should I buy chocolates or flowers or a goat? If you're dating, take notes. Now, apparently his wife was so annoyed with him, this argument was so bad, that she'd moved out of the family home and went back to live with her mum and dad again. So Samson goes to her parents' home and says to his wife's father, I'm going into my wife's room. Now, the nuance here is, of course, an intimate one. He wants to make up with his wife in the old-fashioned way. So he doesn't want to have a chat in the family room. He doesn't want to have a cup of tea in the kitchen. He wants to go to her room with the goat. Don't overthink it. But then we're told her father would not let her go in, the reason being, great sentence, I was so sure you thoroughly hated her. Isn't that a great sentence? Doesn't it describe some of our relationships? I don't just hate you, I thoroughly hate you. I comprehensively despise everything about you. Great sentence. Yeah, I was so sure that's how you felt that I gave her to your friend. Don't worry, isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Okay. Nothing to say here, move along. Clearly we're deep into an episode of the Jerry Springer Show here. I gave your wife to your friend, don't worry about it, because she was the ugliest of my daughters. Take her younger sister, she's much better looking. Even in rural Kentucky, this would be frowned upon. Now, just as a side sort of educational note here, one of the subtexts of the book of Judges is that the people who write the Bible don't like misogyny. And this father and her two daughters belong to an ethnic group called Philistines. And the subtext of Judges is that Philistines mistreat women. They treat women terribly, they regard them as possessions, not people. The writers of the Bible didn't like this. Samson, this redneck character, comes from, he's Hebrew, he's Jewish. He doesn't like this either. He finds it reprehensible and personally hurtful. He liked his wife. He even bought her a goat. He wanted to make up. And now these inbred, misogynistic people, Philistines, have robbed him of that opportunity. They've damaged his life. Next sentence, Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." This is the classic language of revenge. You see, I have a right. Lots of rights, in fact. First of all, I have a right not to have been hurt by you. I have a right for you not to have done those things to me, to have made me feel those emotions and to have gone through all those difficulties. I had a right for you not to do that. But because you did do that, I now have a further right to do something to you, to get my own back, to make you feel the things I felt, to extract revenge. So, he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the grain of the Philistines. He burned everything, together with the vineyards and the olive groves. In the ancient world, this of course was quite a common thing to do. If you had an enemy who you wanted to do violence against, and if your enemy's economy was 100% agrarian, one of the most efficient ways you could make him feel pain was by burning his crops. No crops, no money, no money, no food, no life, no war. And in antiquity, this was quite a common thing to do. Hannibal the Great did it in his conflicts with the Romans. You just set fire to animals, basically, and let the animals run around in the fields of your enemies. It's the ancient version of an unmanned fighter drone. So understand then that what Samson is doing in this sentence is nothing less than an act of war. And you'll notice that that act escalates everything. He falls out with his wife. That's how the story starts. There's just a husband and wife doing what husbands and wives do. They have an argument. And then his wife gets involved with another guy. And now, one sentence later, we're into war. We're into the livelihoods of hundreds and hundreds of people being taken away. We're into hundreds and hundreds of families not having food to eat. It starts here and it ends here. Next sentence. When the Philistines asked, "Who did this?" they were told, "Samson the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend." This is a legitimate question. Who did this? When you struggle to get off the sofa because you're depressed, when you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see and your life's fallen apart, it's legitimate to ask, who did this to me? Who was it who caused so much pain in my life and set my life on such an unpleasant trajectory? It's a fair question. And so as these people wake up in the morning and they look at the charred remains of a lifetime's worth of work, In fact, in the cases of the olive groves and the vineyards, we're talking about generations and generations of work. As they look at all that lying in ruins, as they see the future financial security of all their families disappear in an instant, this is the morning after the stock crash. This is when it all goes wrong. They ask the question, who caused this pain? Who ruined me in such a comprehensive way? And after making some inquiries, they find out the story about Samson and his father-in-law who gave his wife to another guy. So, the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Fair enough. When I read that sentence, I really want to step into the story and ask a question. And the question I want to ask is, did that feel good?
No.
I mean, I get that when you woke up in the morning, you were in pain. I get that. But when you caused pain to them, did their pain take your pain away? Did their agony balance out your agony? When you burned that girl and her father to death, did their screams, did the smell of their burning flesh somehow cancel out the things that other people did to you? Was the whole experience cathartic? Was their pain therapeutic in your life? That's the question I want to ask of their revenge. Did it work for you? Did it do the things you thought it would do? Next sentence. Samson said to them, since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get revenge on you. Notice the psyche. Notice, again, the rationale of revenge. Because you did this, I am justified in doing this. Because you behaved in this way, I am justified in behaving in this way. You've taken things to that level, I'll take them to this level. This again raises another question for me. But not of the protagonists of the story now, but of you and of me. What would that look like in your life? Think about it for a moment. What would you have to do to that person and you know who I'm talking about? What would you have to do to them to make everything okay? At what point would the pain you caused them undo the pain they caused you in the past? And how would you know it would all be over? How do you define the end point of revenge? Back to the story. Samson wasn't troubled by such thoughts. He just attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. This sentence is great in Hebrew. What it says literally is Samson piled leg on thigh. Love that sentence. This is a slasher movie. This is like one of those really cheap horror films. There's just bodies and body parts everywhere. Then we're told that after all that happened, Samson went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. And he went there on his own, probably to reflect on what just happened. And I want to ask of his reflection again, did he feel better? Was the sound of breaking bones and squelching blood that was fresh in his memory therapeutic in his pain? Did what he do to them make up for what they did to him? Did this pain cancel that pain? Did it work? I want to know. What are you feeling right now? Then we're told that the Philistines, it's never over, is it? Never over. It never ends. Went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked them, "Why have you come to fight us?" They said, "We have come to take Samson prisoner, to do to him as he did to us." Again, the rationale of revenge. Because you did this, I am justified in doing this. Your misbehavior justifies my behavior. Revenge. It's beautiful. Makes sense, actually. At a certain level, it makes sense. Its logic is flawless. You made me feel pain, I must make you feel pain. Next sentence. Then 3,000 men. What? You see, 5 minutes ago it was a husband and a wife having an argument and a door getting slammed and a half-finished 2-4. Now there's 3,000 people involved. There's neighbours, there's cousins, there's all people getting dragged into this. These 3,000 men went down to the cave in the rock of Etam, and they said to Samson, "Dude, don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done?" And he answered, look at that sentence, "I merely did to them what they did to me." What word seems wrong in that sentence? Merely. Dude, you just killed hundreds of people. You robbed hundreds of families of their livelihood. You've committed murder today. Nothing of what you've done today is remotely described in the word merely. But you see what he's saying, and this is what revenge does to us. It twists our reality. I'm always the good guy in this story. Always. In my own personal story, I'm always the good guy. My behavior, even when it was bad, was justified because of what they did. Because he did those things, because she said those things, that gives me a moral carte blanche to do and say whatever I like. They were wrong, therefore I can never be wrong. I just merely respond. Isn't it beautiful? They said to him, "Well, I'm sorry, we've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." They said, "Fair enough, we'll only tie you up and hand you over to them, we won't kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. So far, so bad. Then we read, as he approached Lehi, the Philistines came towards him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. The phrase Spirit of the Lord in the Hebrew Bible is a way of talking about someone who's a bit of an outlier, someone who is extraordinarily talented at whatever he or she does. So, for example, the craftsmen who built the Ark of the Covenant and the Temple are described as doing so because the Spirit of the Lord came upon them. The men who wrote the Psalms, very poetic, gifted songwriters, were said to have been gifted by the Spirit of the Lord. It was their gift, it was their thing. Samson's extraordinarily talent was for war. He was one of those people made to be a soldier. That was his gifting, and it's a good gifting. War, as you know, is an art form, and Samson was good at his art. And so, finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, told you it was weird, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, he was a bit of a songwriter in his spare time, he dabbled. He said, "With a donkey's jawbone I made donkeys of them." You see what he did there? It's quite good. It's quite good. "With a donkey's jawbone I've killed 1,000 men." When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramath Lehi, which means jawbone hill, covered in blood and sinew and gore in this story. And there it is. That's the savage, brutal tale. And beyond the barbarism and the weirdness of the story, it's a tale that I think resonates with the wounded corners of your life. The idea, the fantasy of getting your own back is a very appealing one. Revenge is, we even say it, revenge is sweet. So let's go ahead. This is a safe, controlled environment. Nothing as bad is going to happen. Let's go ahead for a moment and entertain the thought of revenge. You know who you're thinking about. You know what they did. You know how they made you feel. So go ahead, think about it. What can you do to hurt the person who hurt you? What can you do? You can surely think of something to hurt them. Hurt is easy, and it's rational. It's even biblical. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's only right that you should do something to them to stop them getting away with it. After all, they hurt you. But just before you go and rush out and buy a 12 gauge, let me give you a few thoughts on revenge that come out of this story. Thought number one: revenge, it seems, makes things worse, not better. Did you notice the downward trajectory in this story? Starts out with a guy and his wife. It ends up with mass murder. This is how revenge is. So maybe the first step that you can take in your difficult journey towards complete forgiveness is in realizing the insanity of the alternative. Ask yourself logically, what would you have to do to them to take away the hurt and pain that they caused you? At what point would their pain eventually end up being your therapy? Seriously, do you think that if you could make them feel bad, it would make you feel better? And no sooner do you begin to ask those questions than you understand that revenge as a concept just doesn't work. And as soon as you realize revenge doesn't work and is actually illogical, it takes you to the alternative. It takes you to the place where you say, well, maybe I should just let things go. Maybe it would be best for me, never mind them, but for me, if I just moved on from the past and let go of the hurt and the pain best I can. Maybe that makes most sense. Thought number two, maybe revenge is God's business, not ours. That's certainly a biblical idea. Look at this sentence. Writing to the church in Rome, the Apostle Paul says, "Do not repay anyone for evil. Be careful to do what is right in God's eyes." This is an important point for you as a Christian. You should not allow someone else's destructive behavior to influence your behavior. Their bad behavior can never be an excuse for you to behave badly yourself. Your behavior as a Christian must be influenced by your internal knowledge of what's right and wrong, and not by the external things that other people are doing to you and saying about you. You as a Christian have signed up for the difficult way of Jesus, and what that means is the way other people treat you should have very little bearing on the way you treat other people. You're to be bigger than that, better than that. Notice he goes on and he says, if it is possible, I realize this is difficult, so he says, there's this caveat, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And what that means, of course, is sometimes it's not possible. In this world, there's always idiots. There's always people looking to, take advantage of you, to use you, to abuse you, to get the better of you. And you should have boundaries in your life as far as those people are concerned. There are situations in life where it's fair to say, I'm sorry, no offense, but that's as far as you go. We don't get to have a relationship again. We don't get to do business again. We don't get to have coffee again. You're there, I'm here, and that's the boundary. Sorry, that's fair enough. Remember, forgiveness doesn't mean there's a reset button. Sometimes there just isn't. So that's what this sentence means. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Then he says, but don't take revenge, my friends. Instead, leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. This is a troubling sentence, I suppose, or perhaps not. I know that many of you have been hurt badly. I know that many of you have been robbed of a past that should have been an awful lot better than what it was. I know that. And I also know that one of the things that really bothers you about it is that person who did those things and said those things, they got away with it. They won. There they are, living their life, doing their thing, perfectly happy, and here you are living with the pain, and you just can't move past it. And I know that's life. I know how it is. And when we take revenge or entertain such fantasies, apparently what we're saying is God does not exist. And so it's up to me. God's not going to fix things, so I got to fix things. And so I'll be the person to bring justice to them. And I'll bring justice in my own pathetic little way. I'll ignore them. That'll hurt them. I won't talk to them. I'll spread rumours about them. I'll ruin their business. I'll give them the cold shoulder. I won't send them a Christmas card or whatever. And then they'll learn the lesson that what they did to me was wrong. This, it seems, is not the Christian way. The Christian way, always, is for you to concentrate on your own good behaviour and let God deal with the bad behaviour of everyone else. And so the question that revenge fantasies raise for us is, do you believe that there is a God? Do you further believe that that God is a God of justice? That he will hold all men accountable for their actions? Do you believe such things? If you do believe such things, then you worry about your own behaviour and let God worry about holding the behaviour of bad men to account, for he will. Have a look at this. This is talking about Jesus. Jesus is our standard, remember. He's the bar that we have to try and get to. Speaking of Jesus, Peter says, when they hurled insults at him, he didn't retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to he who judges justly. So here's Christianity at the office, right? There's this guy at work, and he's, in the words of this sentence, hurling insults at you, whatever that means. Spreading rumours about you, telling lies about you, trying to ruin your career. He's take away your customers, damage your business, steal from you, whatever. There's this guy at the office doing those things. What Jesus requires of me as a Christian is to say, I realize that revenge won't work. Nothing I can do to him will make things better. I can fantasize about, peeing in his coffee or crashing his computer or getting him fired or taking business away from him or just giving him an old-fashioned cold shoulder. None of the things I do to him are going to do me any good at all. God is the judge. And so that being the case, I'm going to focus on my own behaviour. I'm going to focus on being the best person I can be, live as good a life as I possibly can, and I'm going to let God deal with this guy. Because this guy is not accountable to me. He's accountable to somebody else. Thought number 3, finally. And this is probably quite advanced, and I won't force it on anyone. But the antidote to revenge is to wish the person who wronged you well. Jesus said, you've heard it was said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy, which makes perfect sense. Love the people you love, hate the people you hate. Good words to live by. But Jesus then said, I say to you, love your enemies and pray for the people who persecute you. And obviously to pray for a person is to wish that person well. It is to wish God's best in their life. It is to wish that the good would come their way. So the question I would wish to ask of you is there any situation in your life where you really just need to drop it now? You need to stop. Like, what happened, happened. It was then, but this is now. And living in then, hurting about then, wishing you could do things to the person who did those things then, it's just not helping you. It's not helping you. You need to drop it. Another question I would ask: is there any situation in your life where you just need to trust God about things a bit more? Getting through the fog of how you do this forgiveness thing, even though you've been hurt so much, is hard, but maybe it begins by just trusting God a little bit more. Letting Him do His thing. You concentrate on doing your thing. And the final, most difficult question this story would raise for us is there anyone in your life, annoying and horrible as they are, that you need to wish well? And as you wish them well, move on from what they did. It's time. Time for one or two quick questions. There's a few instances in the Gospels where Jesus says, "You've heard it said." And what they've heard said is logical, even biblical, makes common sense. And then Jesus sort of adds a different burden on his followers. For example, with the whole business of murder, for example. Everyone's agreed murder is a bad thing. It's in the Bible. So Jesus says, "You've heard it said, don't commit murder." Fair enough. But I say to you. And then he talks about hatred and anger and so on and so forth. Jesus is difficult to follow for this reason. Lots of the things he says to us and asks us to live by, at first glimpse, seem somewhat illogical. And nowhere more so than here. It seems counterintuitive to love the people who've wronged you, to wish well, to wish good things in the lives of those people. It seems counterintuitive. But it only seems counterintuitive until you consider the alternative. When you consider the alternative of living in hatred and anger and bitterness, it actually makes perfect sense. Anger helps no one. Hatred helps no one. It achieves almost nothing. Okay, Samson, great question. So there's this guy in the Bible, Samson, and he does, by anyone's standard, he's not a good church boy. Right? He drinks way too much beer, sleeps with way too many women, and kills far too many people, right? You know, so he probably didn't go to Sunday school too often. Right? And almost all of Samson's behavior is, by any moral standard, not just ours, but by any moral standard, is disgusting. So there's this disgusting person in the Bible. But the Bible talks about this guy in positive terms. So Samson is spoken of as a hero, which would be bad enough if it was in the Old Testament. But puzzlingly, even in the New Testament, which has had thousands of years of civilization to figure things out, and a fair bit of Christianity to figure things out, the New Testament looks back on Samson and speaks positively about him. A little bit of a technical point, but that's true of the whole of the book of Judges. It's a story about weird people who God seems to like. So, and I like that for obvious reasons. And those are reasons that fit very well in this church. Here's a story about people whose life doesn't fit into a neat Christian box. There's episodes, there's stories, there's misbehaviors, there's attitudes that you really can't fit into any kind of a Christian hole. And yet God, it seems, is bigger than the boxes we make for him. His acceptance is wider than our boundaries. So there's this guy who does bad things, but God is like, "You're cool with me. I like you. I like you." I don't know why, but I'm glad God is like that. I'm glad God is bigger and his arms are wider than the narrow boundaries that the church puts around him. Aren't you glad about that?
Yep.
Well, maybe you don't have reason to be glad about that. I have reason that I'm glad, so there you go. We're out of time, we've got to go. We're going to wrap this series up next week. We've got a great conclusion. Don't miss it. Thanks for coming. God bless you.